Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Denmark becomes the first country in Europe to stop use of the Oxford Astrazeneca COVID-19 vaccine, following recommendation by U.S. health authorities after cases of severe and rare blood clots were found. The officer who shot dead Dante Wright in Minneapolis is to be charged with second-degree manslaughter. Plus, the Nigerian government promises to punish those behind a fire that trapped school children in a straw-hut classroom. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Denmark has become the first country to stop use of the Oxford Astrazeneca COVID-19 vaccine after reports of possible rare blood clots have been reported. The decision will push back its scheduled conclusion of its vaccination scheme to early August from July the 25th. The head of the Danish Health Authority said its investigations showed that 1 in 40,000 people vaccinated with the AstraZeneca shot would get serious side effects. As of April the 4th, the European Medicines Agency had received report of 169 cases of CVST after 34 million AstraZeneca doses had been administered in the EU area.
We suspended the use of AstraZeneca in Denmark on the 11th of March out of an abundance of caution because of these rare side effects. In the month that has passed, we have intensively investigated this signal with national and international experts. We're now convinced of the plausibility and the causality of this rare syndrome of VITT. It is a very serious case. We also have a risk estimate of 1 in 40,000 of vaccinated. This is new knowledge that we didn't have when we took the AstraZeneca in use.
Meanwhile, the European Medicines Agency says it will be issuing a recommendation on the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine next week as reports of rare and severe blood clots emerge. It still believes, however, that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks of the side effects. The EMA says Johnson & Johnson is in contact with national authorities and has recommended storing doses already received until the Safety Committee issues an expedited recommendation. The decision means a delay to vaccination programs across Europe as many countries remain wary of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Staying with vaccination programs across Europe, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Europe will receive 50 million more coronavirus vaccines produced by Pfizer and BioNTech in the second quarter, as deliveries expected at the end of the year will be brought forward. Ms. von der Leyen says earlier deliveries, which will start this month instead of in October, will take total supplies to the EU from Pfizer to 250 million doses in the second quarter in a move meant to compensate for lower supplies from AstraZeneca and possible problems with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Vaccination is picking up speed across Europe. Member states have received over 126 million doses of vaccines as of yesterday. And I'm happy to say that today we have reached the 100 million vaccinations in the European Union. This is a milestone that we can be proud of. But as we can see with the announcement by Johnson & Johnson yesterday, there are still many factors that can disrupt the planned delivery schedules of vaccines. It is therefore important to act swiftly, anticipate and adjust whenever it is possible. And we are doing everything in our power to support Europe's vaccination rollout, also by increasing the supply of vaccines in the coming weeks and months.
More on the COVID-19 pandemic now. The UK is extending surge testing of the South African variant of COVID-19 to a fourth London borough after a case was found in Barnet. Some 44 confirmed and 30 probable cases were identified in Wandsworth and Lambeth, and a further one in Southwark. Meanwhile, staff in care homes in England with elderly residents may be required to get a coronavirus vaccines, according to the government. Well, here's the global update.
In other parts of the world, such as Russia, President Vladimir Putin has received the second dose of a Russian COVID-19 vaccine as he took part in a meeting of the Russian Geographical Society. The Kremlin said last month that the president had received the first shot without disclosing details or providing photographs. No official information emerged on which of the three Russian vaccines he received. France will begin to administer the Johnson & Johnson vaccines as planned after it received its first shipment this week. This is despite reports of severe and rare blood clots in a small group of people who have received the vaccine in the United States. France also says it remains confident in the Astrazeneca shot as its benefits outweigh the risks. South Africa has decided to temporarily suspend the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine following the U.S. Federal Health Agency's recommendation pausing its use because of rare cases of blood clots in 6 people inoculated with it. The South African Health Minister says there have been no reports of such clots after vaccination with J&J vaccine.
We have advised that we cannot take the decision made by the FDA lightly. Based on their advice, we have determined to voluntarily suspend our rollout until the causal relationship between the development of clots and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is sufficiently interrogated.
Finally, in India, coronavirus infections have reached a record today amid oxygen shortages at some hospitals and strict coronavirus curbs in some areas. Health workers in the country's deep and remote villages are racing against time to vaccinate all who fall in the age bracket of the vaccination drive as the country grapples with the second wave of the deadly coronavirus. The country has reported 184,372 cases in the last 24 hours, taking infections to 13.9 million. Deaths rose by 1,027 for a total of 172,085.
The stories now. Ukraine's defense minister Andriy Taran says Russia could store nuclear weapons in Crimea, which has infrastructure prepared for potential nuclear weapons, but that the very presence of nuclear munitions in the peninsula may spark a whole array of complex political, legal and moral problems. This comes as the Ukrainian armed forces rehearsed repelling a tank and infantry attack near the border with Crimea. The drills come a day after U.S. President Joe Biden telephoned Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss a buildup of Russian troops near eastern Ukraine and in Crimea, among other U.S. concerns. Russia seized Crimea from Ukraine in 2014, and fighting has increased in recent weeks in eastern Ukraine, where government forces have battled Russian-backed separatists in a 7-year conflict that Kyiv says has killed 14,000 people. Israel says it will be cooperating with the United States on Iran in the hope that Israeli security could be safeguarded under any renewed Iran nuclear deal that Washington reaches. The statement was made during a meeting between the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. It also comes as Iran moves to enrich uranium up to 60% in response to the sabotage at its key nuclear facility after an explosion at its Natanz uranium enrichment site on Sunday, blamed by Tehran on Israel. Iran said it would begin enriching uranium at 60%, a move bringing the fissile material closer to levels suitable for a bomb. It also said it would activate 1,000 advanced centrifuge machines at the site. Well, in another development, the United States has cautioned Lebanese leaders for their failure to break months of political deadlock and form a new government to address an economic crisis which has left millions facing growing hardship. As Under Secretary of State David Hale was speaking after talks in Beirut with Lebanese parliamentary speakers, while reiterating calls by Washington and its allies for politicians to tackle Lebanon's distressing political and economic crisis.
Some differences between both.
But my message in today's meetings is simple. America and the international community are ready to help, but we can do nothing meaningful without a Lebanese partner. It is time now to call on Lebanese leaders to show sufficient flexibility to form a government that is willing and capable of true and fundamental reform. That's the only path out of this crisis. It's also only a first step. Sustained cooperation will be needed if we're going to see transparent reforms adopted and implemented.
Well, more from the United States. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says a coalition of NATO-led troops in Afghanistan will leave the country in coordination with the planned U.S. withdrawal by September the 11th. Around 7,000 non-U.S. forces from mainly NATO countries, but also from Australia, New Zealand and Georgia, outnumber the 2,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, but still rely on U.S. air support, planning and leadership for their training mission. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in Brussels that it was time for NATO allies to make good on its mantra that allies went into Afghanistan together and would leave together.
This is an important moment for our alliance. Almost 20 years ago, after the United States was attacked on 9/11, together we went into Afghanistan to deal with those who attacked us and to make sure that Afghanistan would not again become a haven for terrorists who might attack any of us. And together we have achieved the goals that we set out to achieve. And now it is time to bring our forces home. President Biden will speak to this in a few hours in the United States. And I'm here to work closely with our allies, with the Secretary General, on the principle that we've established from the start: in together, adapt together, and out together.
An American financer who was convicted for running the largest known Ponzi scheme in history, Bernard Madoff, has died. He was aged 82. Madoff has been suffering from chronic kidney failure and several other medical ailments. He had been held at a federal prison in Butner, North Carolina, after being sentenced in June 2009 to a 150-year term for engineering a fraud estimated as high as $64.8 billion. Madoff's thousands of victims, large and small, included individuals, charities, pension funds and hedge funds. Among those he betrayed were the actors Kevin Bacon, Kira Sedgwick and John Malkovich, Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Sandy Koufax, and a charity associated with director Steven Spielberg. Still to come on the program. Thanks for staying with us. We have news just in about the officer who shot dead Daunte Wright in the United States during a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center. Kim Potter has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. Yesterday, the families of Wright and George Floyd comforted each other during a rally with their lawyer and people in the community. George Floyd, as we remember, was killed in May last year after Derek Chauvin, a police officer, placed his knee on his neck for more than 8 minutes. Daunte Wright was killed on Sunday afternoon at a traffic stop. Here's more on what's going on.
Demonstrators back on the streets a third night protesting the shooting of Daunte Wright. This time, they offered songs and used lights on their phones to send a message to the police.
My sister ain't equal, and my brother can breathe. Hand in hand with my family, we gon' feel these.
The police officer who shot him, Kim Potter, a 26-year veteran of the police force, resigned after being placed on administrative leave. Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon also resigned. The shooting has again drawn reactions from all parts of America as former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama issued a statement calling for a full and transparent investigation.
His name. Dante Life Matters. Dante
Wright's shooting is a reminder of George Floyd's last year in Minneapolis. His family gathered with loved ones of Dante Wright to show their support. The two families gathered with civil rights activists outside the courthouse where former police officer Derek Chauvin is under trial for Floyd's murder, which also sparked national outcry of police brutality.
And I never imagined this is what was going to happen. I just thought maybe he was being arrested. And then when I called back, the girl that he had in the car answered the phone, and it was on a FaceTime. And she said, she was crying and screaming, and she said that they shot him.
You all can't sweep this under the rug anymore. We're here, and we will fight for justice for this family, just like we're fighting for our brother. Yeah. To the protesters all around this nation, stand up. Stand up. We need you all to come out.
Wright's death has ignited 3 days of unrest in the suburb of Brooklyn Center. The region had already been on edge for weeks in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Floyd's family attorney, Benjamin Crump, says he cannot fathom how a police shooting death in this nature could occur so close to where Chauvin's trial was still underway. Back in the court on Tuesday, defense attorneys in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin called an expert witness who testified that the former Minneapolis officer was justified and reasonable in his use of force during Floyd's arrest.
I felt that Derek Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness, following Minneapolis Police Department policy and current standards of law enforcement in his interactions with Mr. Floyd.
Chauvin's defense team also sought to highlight Floyd's apparent history of drug abuse, laying groundwork to support its argument that he died of an overdose rather than from lack of oxygen caused by Chauvin's actions, as the prosecution contends. Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to murder and manslaughter charges stemming from the May 2020 incident captured by bystander videos.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has been monitoring these stories all week and, of course, the Derek Chauvin's trial since it began. She joins us now on the program. Maria, let's begin with the latest reaching us about Kim Potter. That's the officer who shot Dante Wright, being charged with second-degree manslaughter. What more are you hearing at this time?
Well, that is the most recent news, I think, of the day with the Dante Wright case. Understanding, though, that second-degree manslaughter only means potentially 10 years in prison and a $20,000 fine. And so I can guarantee you that we'll begin to see protests and outrage that she is only being charged at this time with second-degree manslaughter. But we also know with the George Floyd case that there was several different charges brought forth. And so, as we know, that Derek Chauvin is being charged with potentially second-degree murder and also third-degree murder. And so you could potentially see another charge coming down in the coming days or coming weeks, because I can tell you that the family, the community, will be very outraged if she was even convicted and only had to serve potentially $20,000 fine and 10 years in prison. So that is probably going to become the focal point, is for the prosecution. And so there are going to be requests for them to potentially add additional charges to Kim Potter, the police officer that did shoot and murder Dante Wright. We
saw a third night of protest, but this time peaceful. and all for Dante Wright. We also saw his family and that of George Floyd's speaking to crowds earlier. Describe to us what that moment felt like. I mean, these are two families with the same grief.
You know, it's an unfortunate story that is being retold way too often here in the United States. And so you're beginning to have families that are supporting one another through these very difficult times. What you're seeing, though, which I think is going to potentially help the efforts of the Floyd family, of Dante Wright's family, and so many other families who have been victims of this type of killing of unarmed Black men, you're going to begin to see them really pushing forward and becoming somewhat of activists, activists against police brutality, and also obviously ultimately activists against the ultimate unnecessary use of force, which can oftentimes end in the death of an individual.
All right then, Maria, but really sad situation in the United States at the moment, and a lot for us to keep our eyes on as well. Thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you for having me.
And from Niger, we hear at least 20 school children have died after their classrooms caught fire in the capital, Niamey. The inferno is said to have started around the entrance of the school, spread into 21 classrooms that were built with straw, trapping the children inside.
Preschool children attending school to get an education, only for their lives to be cut short by an inferno. At least 20 nursery students have been killed by fire in an impoverished school in Niger after they became trapped in their straw-hut classrooms. A teachers' union official says many students were forced to scale the walls to escape because there was no alternative route. Those who couldn't get out were the little ones in preschool.
There were 21 straw-hut classrooms. Around 20 children were trapped in the blaze. If you look at the configuration of the school and where the classrooms were placed along the street, the power of the fire was enormous, and that is why the classrooms caught fire so quickly, and the children were unable to get out.
The Prime Minister has visited the school to offer his condolences to the children's parents.
To lose such young children on the eve of Ramadan is really sad, and all my condolences go to the families. We share their pain. They are everyone's children, so all of us are affected. We will do everything so that the perpetrators, if it is a crime, the perpetrators will be brought to justice.
The origin of the fire is still unknown in the school, where about 800 students attended. According to the UN's development rankings for 189 countries, Niger is the world's poorest nation.
Really sad story there. And finally on the program, hundreds of thousands of Astrazeneca and devout Hindus jostled to take a dip in the Ganges during a religious festival today, hoping to wash away their sins as India reported another record surge in coronavirus infections. As huge crowds made their way towards the river on a special day of bathing during the weeks-long Kumbh festival, health authorities had to pull back a COVID-19 testing crew. Police said 650,000 devotees had bathed in the river since Wednesday morning, and people were being fined for failing to observe social distancing in some areas. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, however, has refused to call off the festival that is scheduled to last the whole month, possibly fearing a backlash from religious leaders in the Hindu-majority country. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shubowale. Bye for now.